Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Mark Parago and welcome back to my channel. When someone played Sicilian Grand Prix attack against our Sicilian defense. So let's start. E4, C5, knight to C3, knight C6, then F4. So instead of F4, white could also play something like bishop E5 first. So the difference here between F4 is after bishop E5, so this move, white is threatening bishop takes C6. White wants that black to create a double pawn. If white played bishop E5, example you played G6, white will just simply capture this knight, bishop takes C6, and then if black played D takes C6, black has a double pawn. Although in this position, black is still fine, even though black has a double pawn because black has pair of bishops. But we don't want to create any double pawn as early in this position. So after bishop p5, what we need to do here is we need to play knight to d4. So after knight d4, bishop c4, although white could play knight f3 here, after knight f3, knight takes b5, knight takes b5, a6, trying to get rid first of this knight, and then the knight went back to c3 and then d6. So in this position, we are going to transpose to the typical Sicilian defense, or like more or less it's like a Sicilian Najdorf setup when white play d4. So let's continue. After d6, if white played d4, you will take, so queen takes d4. So if white played knight takes d4, you could just simply play knight f6. So as you can see in this position, this is the normal Sicilian Najdorf position. But the difference now here is black doesn't have any knight here and white doesn't have any light square bishop, which is very good for black, because a light square bishop could help white attack later on. So in this position, without this light square bishop, it will be very good for black. So after c takes d4, white needs to play queen takes d4. So here, after queen takes d4, you are going to play e5. So what is the reason of playing e5? So as you can see that after black played e5, black creates a weakness, which is the d5 square. But you don't need to worry about this d5 square, because you could always control this d5 square with some of your pieces. So after e5, white will go back queen d3. So here the white's plan is to control this d5. Like there is a plan here for white that he could add one more piece in this d5 square using this knight, like knight d2, knight c4, and followed by knight e3. So here after queen d3, you're going to play bishop e6. Avoid playing knight f6 in this position. Why? Because if you play knight f6 immediately, there is a bishop g5 here for white. Because like example, you played h6, he could now capture this knight, queen takes f6, and then now finally white could control the d5 square very strongly. So after knight d5, example, you go back, which is forced, because if you don't move back your queen here on d8, there is a fork here on c7. So after queen d8, example, white castled here, and then you played bishop e6, example, white played rook fd1. In this position, white is slightly better. Why? First of all, white has controlled already the d5 square. And then, now, even though black has pair of bishops, especially this bishop on f8, this bishop on f8 doesn't do anything much in this position. Although you could play something g6, bishop g7, but the problem is if you develop your bishop here on g7, this d6 pawn will be weak. And then, as I said earlier, in this kind of position for white, white could always add one more piece using this knight to control this square, which is white could play knight d2, knight c4, knight e3, or knight d2, knight f1, knight e3. So now in this position, look at this one. All right. So after that, so now we are going to go on the main move. So after queen d3, black just need to play bishop e6. Okay. So example, black white castled. You don't want to commit this knight of 6. Instead, you are going to directly creating some counter attack or counterplay here on the queen side. So after this rook c8, the idea will be bishop c4, attacking this queen and this rook. So after rook c8, white needs to play rook e1, or he could play b3. Example, white played rook e1. So now you could now play knight f6. So now I am going to give you some difference as earlier, because earlier after black played knight f6, immediately white could control this d5 square. But in this position, after knight f6, if white played bishop g5, you will play bishop e7, and then if white captured immediately, because white wants to control this one, bishop takes f6. In this position, you don't need to worry about this d5 square. Why? Because if white tries to play knight d5 immediately here, you will just simply take this knight. Because if queen takes d5, maybe you could just simply take rook takes c2. Alright? And then although he could go here, and then maybe you could castle here. So I'm not saying that in this position black is better, but I really like the position for black here. First of all, this rook is already on the 7th rank. Even though he will capture here, he will capture here. And then now black's position is fine. Even though white is a pass pawn. Because as I said earlier, the rook is already on the 7th rank, giving white's problem, especially this f2 square. Okay, let's go back. So now let's go back to the main one. So after knight d4, in this position, white needs to move the bishop. So we already discussed what are you going to do if white tries to give this bishop just to get some development. But the main move here for white will be bishop to c4. So after bishop c4, you're going to play e6. After e6, white will develop knight to f3, or he could also play knight to e2. But let's say he played knight to f3, you will play e6, a very important move. You need to remember here, because here the reason why you are going to play a6, it's not really you want to play b5, although you could also play b5 in this position. But one of the idea of this move a6 is whenever white capture this one, knight takes d4, c takes d4, this knight cannot jump here on b5, because example, you played something like different, like this one, g6. Example, you played g6 here, white will just take stakes, and then now there is a move like knight b5 here. And then if you try to play something like bishop g7, white could just check the king, and then now of course this king cannot castle anymore. So before doing, or like before developing your piece, or like yes, your pieces, you need to play a6, right? You need to stop this knight b5. So after a6, knight takes d4, c takes d4, knight e2. Now you will play knight to f6. Okay, if white played a logical move d3, you would simply protect this pawn by playing bishop c5. So in this position, maybe you're going to ask, black has a double pawn, but you don't need to worry about this double pawn, because you could use this double pawn, especially this d4 pawn, as advantage in the black side. Why? Because in this position, this pawn on d4, look at this one, as you could see, the c file. you could always use this C file to create a counterplay on the queen side, because earlier the pawn is here, and then now after you capture this pawn, you are now opening up this C file, so you don't need to worry about this pawn. And also later on you'll have d5, especially if this bishop stays here on c4. You always have d5 to break the double pawn. So after here, white castled. Now this is what I'm talking about. d5, e takes d5, and then now knight takes d5. So in this position, black is fine. Why? First of all, black doesn't have any double pawn. Second reason why black is fine here, as I said earlier, this c file is open. So after this example, white played c3 because this pawn is quite powerful, controlling these two squares and creating some space for black. So here, c3, you will take, b takes c3, and then now castle. So in this position, black is quite fine. Why? Because after castle, the black's plan here is you could just simply play b5, bishop b7, rook c8, something like that, and move your queen maybe on e7, and then rook d8. So that is the plan for black. Just try to put your pieces first. Just try to put your pieces first develop, and then after that you could create some ideas or like some plan, right? So now we are going back. So here after knight d4, bishop c4, e6, if you played knight e2 earlier, we discussed what are we going to do when someone played knight f3. But here after knight e2, now you could play now knight f6. So example, they castle. If they castled, a6, so it's almost the same position as earlier, but the difference is this white knight. The knight here, of course, in this position, it's here on the e2 square, but earlier the knight is on the f3 square. So let's just continue. So example, they played a4, trying to stop you to play b5. Now there is this move, knight takes e4, giving the knight, but you could get back immediately by playing d5, which is forking this knight and this bishop. Like example, after knight takes e4, you could play d5. Now white wants to save the bishop, so he will play bishop d3. You will takes here, bishop e7. Example, they try to play c3, capture, capture, and castle. So here in this position, black is already fine, right? So when you had this position, like exchanging the pieces, sometimes there's a plan that you could play queen c7 first, and then later on you could something like e5, so this bishop will be open. Or you could something play queen c7, bishop d7, and bishop c6. You want to trade this bishop, because here, example, if white tries to play d3, which is a logical move to develop this bishop, but the problem is when white played d3, later on this pawn on d3 will be weak. Alright, like example, in this position, like example, white played d3, you will play queen c7. Example, white develop like this, you could something play bishop d7. So now to attack this one, of course you need to trade this bishop first, because in my opinion this bishop is quite strong, of course, compared to this bishop, because this bishop is controlling these two diagonals. Alright, so now let's just continue. Knight takes e4, d5. If he capture here, knight takes d4, you will just simply capture the knight. C takes d4, bishop d3, it is almost the same, but here bishop takes e4, then now bishop d6. So in this position, black is, I think in my opinion, it is already good for black, with the idea of castle, and then maybe f5 and then e5. Try to get some threat on the center. Alright, so now we are going now to discuss our main topic for this video, which is the Grand Prix attack. So the Grand Prix attack starts with knight c3 followed by f4. So after f4, you will play g6, knight f3, bishop g7. So in this position, there are two moves like main move here for white, which is bishop c4 and bishop b5. So now let's start first if white what are what if white played bishop b5. So if white played bishop b5, immediately knight d4. As I discussed earlier, when white played bishop b5, we need to move this knight, or we need to avoid to create the double pawn. So after bishop b5, we will play knight to d4. Example, they take, knight takes d4, c takes d4, knight e2, and then now knight to f6. Okay, so this one is kind of tricky. So after knight f6, which in my opinion, this is a good move. Why? Because after knight f6, there is a trap here. If your opponent, or like if white made a blunder by simply protecting this pawn by playing d3, now you'll have queen to a5, and then now you will get this bishop. Alright, so if white is very eager to get this pawn on d4, maybe he will play e5, but you don't need to worry about this e5, because once he played e5, you'll have knight to d5, and then now this knight cannot still take this pawn, because whenever he takes this pawn, you will just simply take knight takes f4, and then now here black is already better because of this pawn on e5, although white could always protect this pawn by moving this knight and d4, but the problem here is whenever black castled and played d6, this bishop will now be opened. Alright, so here let's just continue. So example, white decided to play bishop to d3, which is protecting this pawn and now attacking this pawn. So after bishop d3, you will just simply play d6. Okay, because example here, if white played knight takes d4, you could just simply play knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, and then now bishop takes d4, and here white is already good. I'm not saying that in this position, I'm not saying that in this position that black is better, but black is already good in this position. First of all, white doesn't have any attack anymore, because remember, when someone played the Sicilian Grand Prix attack against us, we are going to think immediately that the the plan for white, that white could play f5, queen e1, and then queen h4, trying to attack on our king side. So here after d6, white doesn't take this one. He will play castle. So when you castle, you just simply play castle. So the good thing about here in this position for black is, even though black has a double pawn, but the main problem here for white is this bishop on d3. That's why in this position white needs to play c3. Here he cannot directly play knight takes d4. Why? Because if white played knight takes d4, immediately here there is a queen b6 attacking this knight and pinning this king. So after queen b6, white is forced to play c3, and then now you will get the piece by playing e5. So here, after castle, if white doesn't play c3, you'll have this kind of plan. Knight d7 and then knight c5. Because once this f6 knight reach on the c5, this pawn will be tied up. Of course, because this pawn cannot move. It's either c3 or c4, because now the bishop on d3 is hanging. So now after this, white needs to play c3. But here, what if white immediately play queen e1, which is the typical Sicilian Grand Prix setup. Queen e1 followed by queen h4. So if queen e1, as I said earlier, you'll have knight to d5. So here, to avoid to avoid this knight d5 move, white needs to move the bishop. So he needs to play bishop c4. So here in this position, after bishop c4, there is a very good move here for black. So before I'm going to show you the good move here for black, I'm going to give you few seconds to try to figure out. Okay, to those who get the right answer here, if you could do, you could just comment below, and congratulations. But if you don't see the good move here, it's fine, because we are here to learn something. So the bishop c4. So the good move here in this position, which is d5. As you could see, this move, of course, this d5, it's not a simple, yeah, it's not a simple move to see, because first of all, why you are going to give a pawn here, because there is no attack here, there is no tactics here. What is the reason of this d5? So the main reason of this d5, you are giving this pawn, because if white played bishop takes d5, you'll have knight to f6, and then now by force you could get this bit. You could now get back the pawn, because white cannot play knight takes d4, because knight takes d5, and then now this d4 knight is hanging. All right. So if white tries to protect by playing c4, you could now trap the bishop by playing e6, but you are not really trapping the bishop, because after e6, white has an e5. But here, white is clearly better after e5, because you could just simply take this, e takes d5. If e takes f6, you will just simply play bishop takes f6. So here, black is already clearly better. It's not only black has pair of bishops, but the main reason why black is clearly better here, because of these pieces, because white is not developed yet, right? So now let's go back. So here, after bishop c4, d5, if you play this, of course, you are not going here. You are going on the other side, which is knight to b6. So d3, here, you could take this one, which I think it's good, and then I think after knight takes d5, black black is still better, but here instead of knight takes d5, black will play knight takes c4, d takes c4, and then now there is a queen c7, simply attacking this pawn. So in this position, white is up a pawn, but as I said earlier, white's development, white is still not yet developed, and here after queen c7, the only move for white to defend this pawn, which is b3. Alright, so after queen c7, if white played b3, there are many options here. After b3, there is this move like b5. You you could also play this one, because if they play c takes b5, queen takes c2, and then now this will be a pass pawn, pair of bishops, and then now this pawn is weak on d5. All right. So here, let's just go back. So I'm just going to show you what is the plan on each possible moves for white, so you won't get confused when you play this kind of system against the Sicilian Grand Prix. Alright, so here, let's go back. So what if white didn't take this knight? What if white didn't capture this knight? So now, let's say white played bishop d3. If white played bishop d3, you will just simply play d6, the same idea. Right? Knight takes d4, knight e2, knight f6, and then now this position, it's a transposition than earlier. So here, knight f6 example, because we tackle like knight takes d4 or castle. But now what if white decided to play c3 just to make some square, or like, yeah, some square or some space for this bishop, or room for the bishop. So after c3, you will just simply take b takes c3. Of course, white needs to play b takes c3. Why? Because after b takes c3, so that after white will move this bishop, he could play d4. So that is the plan. So after here, example bishop c2, you will play b6 to get on this square, to get this a very long diagonal. So castle, bishop c7, bishop b7, sorry, d3, queen c7, queen e1. Here in this position, you could just simply play rook c8. So my evaluation in this position, black is better. Why? First of all, this c3 pawn will be a weakness, especially on the endgame. All right, and then now it is very hard for white to create an attack, because even though he goes queen h4 and then f5, okay, he could create something, but I think it is too slow, because in this position white could just um, create a quick plan like rook c8. Like example, in this position you played rook c8 and then now white tries to play f5. So whenever white push this pawn, you could always play d5. This is the plan. White could, black could, black could always play d5 in this position. Why we don't want to play d5 immediately here? Because here in this position, if we play d5 immediately, there is e5. So we could just wait. We could just wait for white to play f5. So we could just simply play rook c8. If he played f5, we had d5, and then now we could now break the center. So example, they played queen h4. So if they play queen h4, maybe we could just simply play something e6 here, so that if they play f5, we could take e takes f5, e takes f5, and then now look at this bishop. Look now, this bishop. This bishop now is very strong. So here black is already better, like rook e8. Alright, rook e8 attacking this knight. This knight cannot just move because the c3 pawn is hanging. Okay, let's just go back. So here, I just showed you if white played bishop c4. But now, the most exciting or important part in this video is the normal, or like the common Sicilian Grand Prix, which is the bishop c4. So if white played bishop c4, you will play e6. If white played bishop c4, e6, and then if white played directly create some attack by playing f5, you will just ignore that f5. You will just simply play knight ge7. So f takes e6, you are going to take with a pawn, this d pawn. Why? Because sometimes I saw some games that they are trying to take with this f pawn. Okay, this is fine, but the problem with this, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that one of the reason why they want to capture with f pawn, because black wants to play d5, but it is not so easy even though you play d5, because here d3, d5, bishop b3, and then later on, if black could castle here, if black will castle on the king side later on, this diagonal will be a weakness for black. So instead of capturing with f pawn, we need to capture with d pawn. So d3, castle, castle, knight d4. So here, as you could see, there is no danger for black, like because if we don't know what to do against Sicilian Grand Prix, sometimes we are afraid, because we know that white is trying to create a very strong attack, which is queen e1, queen h4, f5, something like this, and then bishop h6. So now at least now you have an idea how to stop the attack in the Sicilian Grand Prix. So here, after knight d4, knight takes d4, c takes d4, always, most of the time, when white captures this, we need to capture with this pawn. It's not only after c takes d4 we are controlling the squares, but we could also open up this c5. So knight e2, knight c6, so bishop d2. Why do you think white played bishop d2? So the idea of this bishop d2 is just like, it's not really stopping knight a5, but I think one of the idea of this bishop d2, white wants to keep this bishop. So now let's see. After knight f5, okay, oh, knight f5, knight a5, then knight f4. So this one looks very strange, because after knight f4, so one of the idea of this move is whenever you capture this, knight takes c4, d takes c4, and maybe this knight could go here on d3. But I think you don't need to worry about this one, because I think knight f4, you could just delay this. You could just delay this knight takes c4. Instead, you could just simply play bishop d7. So queen e1, here, rook to c8, attacking this pawn. So whenever they play b3 and then play b5. So as you can see in this position, white doesn't have any attack or play in the king side. Instead, black has a very quick counterplay already on the queen side. Okay, let's just go back. Let's just go back. So knight e7, f takes e6. You'll play d takes e6, d3, castle, castle, knight to d4. Knight to d4. Let's say they play bishop to e3. Connect the two knights. So this is the very important. So in this Grand Prix attack, you need to act quickly if you're playing black, of course, because you don't want to you, you don't want to make any waste of moves, because if you play some random move or like some waste move here, white could attack you on the king side very quickly. All right, so here queen d2, you could simply take knight takes f3. Sample there, if rook takes f3, of course there is knight e5, and here black is already better. Rook f1, you captured, takes, queen takes d2, bishop takes d2, and then b6. So in this position, there is no problem anymore here for black, especially after this bishop on c8 to develop here on b7, because here this pawn is weak, white is a double pawn, and then now these two bishops will be very strong. All right, so now let's go to the what if white didn't play f5. So okay, I forgot to mention that what if white played e5 trying to get on the square. It's fine. There is no problem with this e5, even though this e5 looks good for white, because after e5 you could play knight e4 and then knight d6. But after e5 you could always play d5. If they do e takes d6 en passant, you don't need to take this pawn immediately. Instead, you could just use this knight to get this pawn. How? By playing knight h6, right? So knight e4, then knight f5. So it's fine for black, who will take back the pawn and black has a very good piece play. So here, if they take, like example, knight takes c5, if white played knight takes c5, I think it is now good to capture with the queen. Why? Because once you capture this, queen takes d6, you are attacking these two pieces, pawn and the knight on c5. So after queen takes d6, white needs to go back. So here, even though like black is down a pawn, but as you could see, the white's pieces is uncoordinated. Now this bishop has a problem. White will take time just to develop this bishop. So I think it is a very enough compensation now for black. Right, so now let's go back. So let's go to the main one. So example, white played d3, knight e7, and then now they castle. So when they castled, you will instantly play d5. Okay, so here bishop b3, castle, they played f5. So this is the position that you always see in the Sicilian Grand Prix. All right, so now when you had this e6, knight ge7, bishop g7, d5, so when they played f5, you will take this first. Remember, d takes e4 first. Why? Because you don't want to take with this one, e takes f5, because once you take on e takes f5, you are just giving a chance for this light square bishop to be strong. So first is you need to take with d takes e4 first. So after d takes e4, if of white cannot play f takes e6, because you could just get the piece e takes f3. And then now if they played e takes f4, you could simply trade the queen and get this free pawn. So instead, there's a good move here for white, which is f6. So if black played f6, bishop takes f6, knight takes e4, bishop to g7. So here, once again, white doesn't have any attack yet. All right, because that is the main problem when we are playing against the Sicilian Grand Prix. We just don't want that white could create a very strong attack, which is the queen e1, queen h4 idea. So here after bishop g7, white cannot play knight takes c5, because after knight takes c5 you could just simply get this knight by playing bishop d4 check. Knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and then now you'll get this knight. So here the plan will be b6, bishop b7. After b6, bishop b7, you could just simply play knight f5 and control this square. So what if white immediately play bishop g5, trying to get this square? After bishop g5, there is a f5 move here, right? So as I as I said earlier, like after white cannot take this knight takes c5 because of this bishop d4. So after f5, white needs to move the knight. Like example, knight c3. So after knight c3, black is quite fine here. Like after knight c3, black could play something h6, move this king, and then followed by e5. All right. So here bishop g. So now after d5, what if they didn't play this one? What if they play queen e1? So if they play queen e1, now it's time for black to get this bishop. Very important. Remember, guys, in one of the pieces that we want to trade when someone played Sicilian Grand Prix attack is this bishop, this light square bishop. This light square bishop is more important than this dark square bishop. Always remember that. So that's why after knight a5, bishop d2, okay, you don't need to take, because anytime you could just always trade this bishop on d3. So you want to connect your two knights by playing knight ec6. So after knight ec6, example, they try to continue their plan, queen g3, a6, threatening b5 and trying to trap this bishop. So here, if e takes d5, yeah, you could just simply play e takes d5, because after e takes d5, white cannot capture this d5. Why? If white played knight takes d5, you will play knight takes b3 and get this knight on d5. If white will play bishop takes d5, you'll have bishop takes c3, and then now you could get this bishop again. All right. So here, after a6, white played a3, trying to maybe play bishop a2. Now that is the time that you could take this b3 bishop, because as I said earlier, um, we want to get this bishop, but black delayed to capture this b3 bishop because black is waiting that white will play a3. So after a3, knight takes b3, c takes b3, now knight a5. So here black is already better because of this weakness. This is a weakness, this d3 is a weakness. Right? So yeah, so something like this. So here you could just go here. So I think that's for now, that is the Sicilian Grand Prix. So that is the variation or setup that you could use against the Sicilian Grand Prix attack. So if you have any questions regarding this opening, or like any move order or sequence, you could just always comment below, and then for the next video I am going to try to discuss what what is your question about. Okay, so thank you again, and for the past few days, thank you to all my subscribers that who subscribe or help my channel, and also thank you for all the comments. I really appreciate your intention to improve your game. So whenever you had any suggestions or comments, feel free to comment in this video. Thank you so much, and hoping to see you again for my next and following videos. Thank you again, and see you on my next video. Bye.